We start our show this week here on Friday Live from the Mill with photographer, writer, and champion of all things Nebraska, I might say, Alan Bartels. He's written a new book called Secret Nebraska Sandhills, a guide to the weird, wonderful, and obscure. The official book release is a week from today, happening at the Plains Trading Company in Valentine. That is the inaugural event at the store's new event space. And then there's more events after that. There's one coming up on the 11th in Thetford. We've got one at the Golden Husk in Ord, at the Nebraska Grown Arts Festival. And then Alan's coming back to Lincoln, even though he's here this morning, at Francie and Finch Bookstore on April 25th. And full disclosure, I am proud to call Alan a good friend of mine. Alan, it's great to see you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Genevieve.
You betcha. Well, this follows up a book that you wrote before, of kind of quick hits, I guess you could say, in the series of 100 Things to Do Before You Die, and yours was, of course, 100 Things to Do in the Sandhills. But you had more to say about the Sandhills. What is it about the Sandhills?
Oh, it's just a magical place where wildlife thrives and families work hard, and it's described as untouched or pristine, and that's probably not accurate, but it's pretty close. And I love to disappear out there and meet the people and take beautiful photos and help the turtles across the road and learn about the obscure history of that 20,000 square mile region.
I have often told people that you did not show up to a birthday party that I had because you were in the Sandhills photographing rare flowers. You're very into the nature there and very in touch. Thought of that when you mentioned the helping the turtles across the highway.
Yeah, I hope you forgive me for that. One of these days you keep bringing it up. But
you sent me a photo, and that is all I needed. That was beautiful. The frilled orchid or something?
It was a prairie-fringed orchid, endangered species.
There you go.
Yeah, one of the magical things that exists in the Sandhills.
Well, your photography certainly does highlight all that there is in the Sandhills. And I love in this new book the meadowlark perched on the cowboy boot on some fencing there. And I also noticed the pictures of Carhenge are actually before there was a big project there to paint murals on that art installation near Alliance. How many photographs did you take maybe that were new for this book versus how many did you mine from your vast store of past photography?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Probably, I don't know, 75% of the photos in this book I took for this book. One critique of the travel book I did about the Sandhills was that there was not enough photography, and that's because people got used to my photography or liked my photography from my years at Nebraska Life magazine. So the nice change from this book, and this is not a travel book, but there are more than 160 color photos in the book, which my publisher, Reedy Press out of St. Louis, they just did a beautiful job. The book turned out beautiful. And yeah, the interior photos of Carhenge are before the recent mural project, but I do have Carhenge on the cover with one of the beautiful new murals that everybody should go see out there.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what they've done there with that installation. Okay, so we got to get into this book a little, but we won't give folks too many spoilers. However, you got me pretty good on something. I do kind of pride myself on a little bit of my own knowledge of Nebraska, and especially Long Pine, where, full disclosure, I took part of my honeymoon, so you know that I love this spot. That was almost 16 years ago, though. I did not know about something called fossilized lightning.
Yeah, so Long Pine's one of them special little communities in the Sandhills, and I was traveling through one day, and I went to the museum there, and coincidentally, I knew the volunteer that was working that day, Nancy Carley, and I didn't know she'd be working, but anyway, I just walked in and I said, Nancy, what's the strangest thing you've got in this museum? And they had just had a recent donation, so she went looking for it, and I think she had to call somebody, and that lady came down, and they were happy to drop what they were doing for my odd request, but they finally found the thing, and it was a piece of fulgurite, which is sandhill sand fused when it was hit by a lightning strike. And through the center of it, where the lightning actually went, the heat turned that sand into glass. And so it looks like a piece of petrified wood with a shiny sphere of glass going through the center of it. And so, I don't know if I was familiar with Fulgurite or not, but I looked it up, and it sells for a lot of money online, and it happens around the world. But I would like to find my own piece out there in the Sandhills sometime. But it's a really cool thing, and I suggest everybody make stops at those little small town museums. You never know what they're going to have.
There's going to be something interesting for sure.
Yes, yes.
Maybe even something that looks like a monkey, which you do address in this book as well, I've got to say. You do have quite the range, I will tell listeners, in the book. There's everything from arts to haunted houses that travel, lake monsters, animals and the environment, as we talked about a little bit, oddities of history, like a county where you could not get a beer for well over 100 years. How did you pull all of these stories together?
Well, yeah. So, a lot of these things, I picked up little tidbits of things while I was traveling for Nebraska Life magazine, and also in my freelance career before and after that. And one of those little tidbits that I always wanted to investigate was Nebraska's last dry county. And, McPherson County, Nebraska was founded in 1890, but when they were celebrating, they weren't allowed to have a beer or a wine or a glass of whiskey, at least not legally anyway, because it was not legal for the next 114 years until the commissioners authorized them to sell a liquor, or to give away a liquor license. And so that's something I would definitely wanted to include in this book. And they've got a roadside marker that says Nebraska's last dry county. And I could have just included a picture of that marker, but that's kind of boring. So what I did was I included a picture of that marker, and then there's this well-traveled friend of mine and her husband, Genevieve Randall, and her husband Jason. They're always up for an adventure, and for listeners who don't know, Genevieve is one of the best-traveled Nebraskans in Nebraska. We spend, when we get together, we could talk for hours on the things we've seen and things we didn't know about that the other one has went and done. But anyway, Genevieve and Jason were happy to meet me out there in McPherson County in the little unincorporated village of Tryon. And we met at the bar there, the Lodge, which has the only active liquor license in the entire county. And so there's a picture in the book of Genevieve and her husband and the servers serving them a beer. And we had a great time out there. But that's just one of them little jewels. It's just a little tidbit of history, but with a little bit of investigation, it became a full feature in the book.
Like you say, this isn't a travel book, but I did want to ask you something that I think sometimes people struggle with in Nebraska. And I went through a learning curve at first. We used to do some traveling with the kids, my two stepdaughters, and you get to a place and they're not open. I think when you live in the southeast part of the state, if you're near Lincoln or Omaha, you just have this expected routine, but the routines and the space between places is so vastly different the further you go west, and especially then in that north central part of the state where it's sandhills and mostly ranch land. How do you come across these secrets, which won't be secrets once we read your book, right? How do you get to know the folks? How do you know where to find these interesting things?
Yeah, some of it's just happenstance while I'm traveling around, but I've made friends over that region for the last couple decades, and they let me know about stuff. They share folklore and tidbits or tell me about new things. So there's kind of a loose network of how I find out about those things. But the best part is just exploring, taking that. I don't know if there's any asphalt in the Sandhills that I've not been on, but there's some trails and some dirt roads I still need to explore. So you just never know what you're going to come across. But, for this book, some of the things are entirely off-road.
This is true. Probably those are the ones that I haven't seen, to be honest with you. But I did, however, go to Lake Walgren, and I did not see a monster. I only saw baby wood ducks. So, just so you know.
That's
Did you
great.
see a monster when you were at Walgren Lake?
I saw a monster-sized snapping turtle at Walgren Lake. And maybe that's the source of those legends that started more than 100 years ago.
Maybe so. Well, you have a number of events that people can come to, including one I mentioned at the top of the show. Do you want to give us the rundown again, Alan?
Yeah, and I will say the official book release event is at Plains Trading Company Booksellers in Valentine, which has long been my favorite bookstore in all of Nebraska. And, Dwayne, the owner there, helped me years ago with some great advice for my first book. So I thought it appropriate to have the release event in the Sandhills. That'll be April 10th, which is a week from today, from 4 to 6 in their new event space. The next morning at the Thomas County Library in Thedford, and then later that afternoon at the Golden Husk Theater in Ord. Lots of other events and signings and author talks and slideshows coming up. Follow me on Facebook or go to my website, alanjbartles.com.
Okay, and if you forget all of that, you can, of course, always link to more information about everything that we feature on Friday Live by going to the Friday Live page at nebraskapublicmedia.org. Again, the book is by Alan Bartles, Secret Nebraska Sandhills, a guide to the weird, wonderful, and obscure. Alan, thank you, my friend.
Thanks for encouraging me to travel east for once.
Absolutely, absolutely. Telling your stories from the places we call home. This is Nebraska Public Media.